When the German women were captured and sent across the ocean, their expectations were fixed in terror. They had been told stories of enemy cruelty, chains, cages, humiliation. In their minds, captivity meant erasure, the slow stripping away of dignity until nothing remained. But when they stepped off the ships and into the camps of America, what shocked them most was not cruelty, but glances. Eyes lingered longer than rules allowed. Soldiers' gazes carried something they had not expected to find in the eyes of their captors: attraction. The women tried to dismiss it at first. They kept their heads lowered, their steps measured, their bodies stiff with fear. The guards issued commands in English, some in halting German, leading them into barracks built from wood and wire. Yet in the pauses between orders, in the silence of shared space, they felt it, the weight of men's eyes resting on them. It unsettled them more than anger would have. For anger, they understood. Attraction was something else, something forbidden, something dangerous. Whispers spread quickly among the prisoners. They look at us differently. Their eyes do not hate us. Some dismissed it as imagination, but others knew better. They had felt the pause in a soldier's step, the subtle softening of a gaze, the quick glance that darted away when caught. It was not universal. Many guards remained cold, distant, impassive. But some, young men barely older than the women themselves, could not hide the flicker of interest. For the women, raised under the strict codes of the Reich, the experience was disorienting. Attraction was supposed to be a weapon wielded by men of their own nation, controlled, arranged, dictated by ideology. To feel it here, from enemies in foreign uniforms, was a violation of everything they had been taught. And yet they could not ignore it. Diaries captured the confusion. One young woman wrote secretly, "Today a soldier watched me as I carried water. His gaze was not cruel but searching, almost tender. I wrestled with the same tension. They had been trained to see these women as enemies, symbols of a regime their brothers had died fighting. Yet war did not erase desire, nor the natural pull of one young face toward another. Guards scribbled in their own notes, never meant for official eyes. One wrote, "They are prisoners, yes, but when they laugh among themselves, I forget. They are just girls. I catch myself staring too long. I must not, but I do." At first, nothing crossed the line of rules. Glances remained glances. Words remained unsaid. But the air grew heavy with the knowledge of what lingered beneath the surface. The women noticed when soldiers positioned themselves closer than necessary. The men noticed when women brushed hair from their faces with slow, deliberate motions. Every small act became charged with meaning. In the barracks at night, the women whispered of it. Some were angry, disgusted by the very idea. "They see us as prey," one said. Others, lonely and far from home, admitted they felt stirred by the attention. One voice, trembling in the dark, whispered, "For the first time, I feel like I still exist." Her words carried through the silence, unanswered but deeply felt. The greatest shock was not in the attraction itself, but in its restraint. The women had expected advances, demands, violations. They had braced for the worst, but it never came. Instead, they were confronted with something subtler, soldiers who clearly felt desire but refused to act on it. That discipline was more confusing than cruel. "I would have been—" One diary captured the paradox. "I saw it in his eyes, the way he lingered, and yet he did nothing. Why? If we are his prisoners, why does he stop himself? It is almost kinder, and that is what frightens me." The attraction unsettled both sides because it revealed a truth that war tried to erase. They were all still human. Beneath uniforms, beneath propaganda, beneath the weight of national hatred, there remained the unshakable force of human longing. and to recognize it in the eyes of an enemy was the greatest shock of all. As the weeks passed, the tension deepened. The women carried themselves with more awareness, feeling the eyes that followed them. The soldiers, too, grew restless, caught between duty and instinct. They could never speak of it, never act, but the knowledge was there, alive in every shared glance across the fences, in every pause longer than it should have been. It was a secret war within the war, a battle of restraint, of silence, of recognition unspoken. And though no one dared to name it aloud, the truth was written in their eyes. Attraction, forbidden and undeniable, had taken root even in the heart of captivity. The days grew longer, and so did the silences between the women and their guards. Every command barked in English was followed by a softer moment, eyes that lingered too long, a hesitation when passing food, a voice that softened when it could have hardened. The German women noticed everything. They were trained to. Captivity had sharpened their senses, and in the smallest gestures they recognized what could not be spoken aloud. It began with proximity. The guards, young men drawn from towns and farms, found excuses to be near. When the women were led to washrooms, soldiers paced closer than necessary. When they carried buckets or bundles, a guard's hand would hover for an instant too long, as if ready to help but stopping at the final moment. None of this broke rules outright, yet all of it spoke volumes. One prisoner wrote in her hidden notebook, "He stood only a breath away. I felt the warmth of his presence. He did not touch me, and that is what unsettled me most. To feel desire in silence is a heavier weight than to feel it in action." Another confessed quietly to her companions at night, "I hate it, but I miss it when it is not there, the way they look, the way they pause. It reminds me I am alive, that I am still a woman." She was scolded for such weakness, yet no one denied they had felt the same. The Americans were no less conflicted. One guard scrawled a note in his personal journal. "They are enemies, yes, but not monsters. When I see them laugh among themselves, I forget. Sometimes I dream of them, not in shame, but in longing. I know I cannot act, duty forbids it, but desire does not die so easily." The struggle played out daily in restrained gestures. Bread passed with fingers brushing for only a second. A blanket folded neatly on a bunk when no one was watching. A canteen of water held out with an unnecessary softness. Each act was small, but together they formed an invisible thread stretched taut between captor and captive. One evening, the thread grew dangerously visible. During a routine meal, one of the younger guards paused too long as he handed bread to a prisoner. His eyes lingered, hers lifted, and for a moment the mess hall fell into a silence so thick it was unbearable. Another guard cleared his throat sharply, breaking the spell, and the young man flushed crimson. Nothing more was said, but the women whispered of it that night. He wanted to speak. He almost did. The risk of discovery was ever present, but so too was the undeniable current that ran beneath discipline. At times, the attraction found its way into unexpected places. Music, faint from a guard's harmonica, drifted across the yard one evening. The women, gathered at their barracks, froze at the sound. It was not an order, not a command, but a melody. One of them hummed along softly, then another. The guard looked up, startled, then continued playing. For a few moments, captor and captive were bound not by war, but by the simple, dangerous intimacy of a shared song. Diaries recorded the moment with awe. It was only a tune, nothing more. Yet in that sound, I felt the walls crumble. His music spoke what his eyes had always told me, that he saw me, not as enemy, but as woman. The tension did not go unnoticed. Officers reminded the guards sternly, "No fraternization. These women are prisoners, not guests." The words carried weight, but rules could not extinguish instinct. If anything, the warnings only deepened the secrecy, sharpening every glance, every silence. One night, a storm rattled the camp. Rain hammered the barracks' roofs, thunder rolled like artillery, and the women huddled together in fear. The guards, soaked and weary, paced the perimeter. At dawn, one of the prisoners stepped outside to fetch water. She slipped in the mud, stumbling, and a soldier rushed forward before she could rise. He caught her elbow, steadied her, and in that brief touch was more meaning than words could hold. She looked up into his face, rain streaming down, and saw not triumph, not cruelty, but longing. They said nothing. The guard released her quickly, but she carried that touch back into the barracks like a secret flame. The women argued about such moments. Some condemned them as betrayal. "We dishonor ourselves to notice them," one hissed. Others defended the strange comfort of being seen. "Would you rather be invisible?" another countered. The debates went unresolved, but the truth lingered in every pair of flushed cheeks, in every diary entry written in trembling hands. For the Americans, the conflict was sharper still. They had taken vows of discipline, sworn to uphold the Geneva Convention, warned again and again of the dangers of entanglement. Yet when they stood watch outside the barracks, listening to laughter spill through thin wooden walls, they felt the weight of temptation. One guard wrote privately, "I would rather face gunfire than the silence of wanting what I cannot have." The women's greatest shock, however, remained the restraint. Attraction, they could understand. They had expected it in uglier forms. But to feel it present and yet withheld was disarming. It revealed not only desire but control. It suggested that the enemy was not only strong but disciplined, that he chose to deny himself what he might have taken. That denial, paradoxically, made the longing sharper. One prisoner summarized it in her diary. "We feared violation, and instead we found reverence. It is unbearable because it is gentler than we deserve, and yet it awakens something I cannot admit aloud." The attraction never crossed into scandal, never became public. It remained hidden in glances, gestures, fleeting moments that both sides carried like forbidden treasures. But it was real, too real to be forgotten, too human to be erased. And as the war neared its end, and whispers of repatriation grew, the women realized that what shocked them most was not that their captors had shown attraction, but that they themselves, despite everything, had felt it too. The war ended not with a roar, but with a silence that unsettled the women more than gunfire ever had. One morning the guards read orders aloud. Germany had surrendered. The Reich was broken. For the prisoners, the words fell like stones. Some wept openly, others clenched fists until their nails cut into their palms. The shame was unbearable, but beneath it lived another truth. Now their time in America would end, and with it the strange, forbidden thread that had bound them to their captors. The camp shifted overnight. Guards walked with a different posture, lighter but also conflicted. The women noticed how eyes lingered longer now, as though both sides knew their glances had an expiration date. The restraint that once felt permanent now felt fragile, ready to shatter under the weight of farewell. Every day carried the sense of something slipping away. Whispers among the prisoners grew more urgent. "We will leave soon. Perhaps next month. Perhaps tomorrow." The uncertainty magnified every interaction. A guard holding open a gate, a soldier handing out rations, even the briefest smile became charged with meaning. What had once been a game of denial became a series of final performances, silent confessions passed without words. One evening, a soldier lingered near the barracks, his patrol slower than usual. Inside, the women hushed, pretending to sleep. One dared to peek through a crack in the wooden wall. She saw him pause, staring at the building as though memorizing it. His shoulders sagged, his hand clenched the strap of his rifle, and then he walked away. She never saw him again. In her diary she wrote, "He said nothing, but his silence told me everything. He wished to remember us. He wished to keep something of us when we are gone." Farewell came in waves. Trucks arrived to carry groups of women back toward ports. Each departure was a wound for those who left and those who remained. At the gates, guards stood in rows. Some saluted stiffly, others shifted uneasily. One prisoner locked eyes with a soldier as she climbed onto the truck. Neither spoke, but the look between them was so raw that her companions whispered about it for days. Later she confessed, "I felt more seen in that one look than in all the years of my marriage. It will haunt me forever." For the guards, the departures were equally haunting. They had carried out orders with discipline, but beneath the surface they had lived another war entirely, a war of restraint, of longing, of forbidden admiration. To watch the women leave was to watch possibility vanish forever. One guard scribbled in his journal, never sent, never shared. "I will never see her again. I never touched her, never spoke her name. But she has marked me. I am ashamed to admit it, but I would rather stand another year of war than feel this emptiness." The voyages back to Europe were long and bitter. The women stood at ship rails, watching America fade into horizon mist. They had arrived expecting cruelty and humiliation, prepared for chains. They left carrying something far stranger, the memory of men who had desired them but never crossed the line of discipline. It was a paradox that gnawed at them in silence. One whispered to her bunkmate, "They wanted us, yet they let us go. Why?" The answer never came, but the question followed them across the ocean. Returning to Germany was a descent into devastation. Cities were ruins, food scarce, families broken. The women stepped into landscapes unrecognizable, where hunger hollowed cheeks and despair darkened eyes. They did not speak of America's glances. They did not dare confess that they had been seen as women behind enemy fences. Such words would sound like betrayal. Instead, they spoke only of work, of discipline, of waiting. But in private, in diaries hidden beneath floorboards or whispered confessions decades later, the truth emerged. One wrote years afterward, "The greatest shock of my captivity was not hunger or fences. It was that my captors looked at me not as prisoner but as woman, and that I, in return, felt alive beneath their gaze. I never forgave myself, and yet I never forgot. For some, the memory softened into gratitude. For others, it remained a wound, a constant reminder of weakness. Yet for all, it was unforgettable. They had been shocked not by cruelty, but by restraint. That shock cut deeper than chains ever could. The Americans carried the memories too. Many never spoke of it, burying their longing under layers of silence. Some confessed in journals found only after death. "She never spoke to me. I never knew her name. But when she looked up once and our eyes met, I felt the whole world change. It lasted only seconds, but I will carry it forever." Others hinted to wives or children that captivity had been more complicated than official stories allowed. Few were believed. Decades passed. The women aged, married, raised children. The men returned to their towns, built families, lived ordinary lives. But in the quiet of night, both remembered. A glance across a barracks, a touch of hands over bread, a soldier's flushed cheeks, a prisoner's hidden smile. These moments lived on like ghosts. Historians rarely include these truths in books. They prefer Battet, Less, generals, treaties. Yet in the silence of camps, another history endured. A history of forbidden attraction, of humanity discovered where it had no right to be. The war had been fought with bombs and blood, but within its shadows, men and women discovered something more disarming than violence: desire restrained by discipline. One former prisoner, interviewed in her 80s, admitted softly, "We feared violation, but what we found was worse. We found gentleness. It haunted us, because it proved the enemy had honor, and that made our hatred harder to carry." And that is the story they never told in letters home, never admitted in censored reports. That is the story they carried quietly for the rest of their lives. That in the heart of captivity, behind fences meant to erase them. They were shocked to be seen not as enemies, not as prisoners, but as women.